guys, Four Seasons and I have great plans for 2026. I present you my own tournament series. It's going to consist of 4 Eco Championship qualifiers throughout the year. Here are the details. Here's the entry fee. It's going to be free for all members over on MetaFi. Hundreds of Chester chests, 2 Four Seasons main event tickets up for grabs, or you can cash them in for chests if you don't plan on going to the event. And the top 8 of each of these will qualify for the Eco Championship, the end-of-year finals, which will be a 32-player event. Here are all the details. Of course, going to be free entry if you won your slot. There's going to be 1,000 treasure chests in total. You're going to be winning your own championship playmat with artwork by Adriano Kitani. You'll make it in collaboration with Adriano. Adriano does beautiful art on my channel here. I will pay for 4 high-quality playmats so you can play with your own trophy playmat after winning. And then the top 8 from this tournament will qualify for the following year's championship, which will then be a 40-player tournament. So yeah, I'm very excited for 2026, and I hope to see you over there on MetaFi to take part in this awesome tournament series. Thank you to Four Seasons for sponsoring this.
Oh, baby, baby, I did it again. I played with your heart, got lost in my game.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I was just listening to a little bit of music ahead of today's episode of Metagame Monday. We all know what we're here for. We're here to dissect what happened over the course of the last week, the 4 challenges that were played, and, of course, the Legacy Showcase that a lot of people were looking forward to, myself included. Unfortunately, my journey got cut short already in round 1. I got bested by Cradle Control and decided to make some content instead of playing it out from the 0-1 bracket, but I'll certainly try and come back stronger. So the first column here, those are the top 8 for the showcases. So these 8 players made it all the way to the showcase qualifier. That's the promised land. Everybody want to go there. And these 8 players made the most of yesterday's tournament. I believe it was exactly an 8-round tournament with 211 players, which is one short of, the bump up to 9. So it was a clean cut for top 8. You needed to 7-1 this tournament. Very, very hard working conditions. And in the end, lands faced off against blue-black. Let's call it mid-range, but when I say blue-black mid-range, I'm essentially talking about tempo deck that is just slightly bigger. So more on that later. Single copy of Mardu Energy made it into the top 8, and a couple of versions of Oops All Spells. So the Boogeyman is back. What really gives hope to a lot of blue mages is, of course, the Jeskai control deck that made it. I even used Taste the Mind Sculptor here to symbolize the deck. It was cool to see that card clinch, a ticket to the Promised Land. We had a little bit of Besiege/Saga Storm action, and then Sneak and Show is back with a vengeance. So let's try and place these decks into their respective columns and go from there. Oh, combo control. So now this next column is going to be the 8 finalists from the 4 challenges played during the week. So couple of Dimir tempo decks, no surprise there. That is quickly becoming the de facto fair deck of the format. A sweet version of Up the Beanstalk made it. I believe this was very heavy on Riddlers and Felia. Then, of course, Tony Scapone, the Madman, Coveted Jewel. Normally a vintage card, but, if Tony Scapone can find a way to combo out the opposition, he will. And he is frequently featured here on Metagame Monday. Always cool to see. Single copy of what I believe was Death and Taxes. Death and Taxes, a deck that is generally very, very strong into, the fair side of the format, and then it can struggle against the unfair side of the format. Cradle Control took down a challenge. That was awesome to see. And a sweet version of Affinity did as well. So let's try and place these in their proper columns. Tempo, Creatures, Degenerate Combo, and Fast Graveyard. All right, so that leaves us with these columns to work with. And with a larger number, we see 59 here, of course, we now get more clear trends. Also, showcases, way more, let's call it top-heavy, than challenges, which are way more top-heavy than leagues, which are more top-heavy than your local legacy. That's always been the case. There's some kind of hierarchy there when it comes to the competitive degree. Also, I can't remember if I mentioned it, but I'll do it now. I am featuring the 6-2 decks or better from the showcase and all of the top 8s from the challenges. So first column here, This is a huge chunk, like absolutely huge. This is something like 20% of all of the top 8s and top finishes this past week are from Oops All Spells, and then splashed in a little bit of Fast Reanimator. This means we now cannot sleep at the wheel anymore. Oops All Spells is not just a niche deck that we can kind of, oh yeah, that's the Japanese player shouting who's just playing that deck, so sure, he'll do well, but I'm not going to prepare for it. We really have to prepare for Oops All Spells. This is a huge chunk. Look at all of this, even winning tournaments. And the thing is about online Magic, so I'm taking the quote-unquote data from online Magic, so that's also what I'm the most interested in personally. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is Oops All Spells is very convenient. Let's say you have a flexible job. You can actually play Oops All Spells on the side. Let's say you're playing multiple tournaments. Oops All Spells is great. You'll be playing somewhat short games, and that's manageable, right? So this is not really... If you just want to win your next 4-round Legacy local the next Wednesday, this is not too relevant, right? But over here, we're trying to win the next challenge, so it is super relevant. That's just to clarify in case anybody was wondering. So yeah, it's we need to get creative here. We need to now respect Fast Graveyard, and as we've talked about before, we have this Fast Reanimator deck that's basically just hoping for its time in the sun, and partially it's getting there. But there's always this, blue-black Reanimator or Oops All Spells to kind of foil this deck's greatness. So that's just a little bit of a fun one to throw in there. The Tempo pile is now incredibly polarized. Remember, beginning of this new format after Entomb and Naru got banned, we had I was leaning towards Izzet in the early stages. I said I needed more time to build, a good Dimir deck. That's still true, but I do think I have had that time. So I'm very, very confident in the versions of Dimir that I have sleeved up these days. But yeah, Kaito representing the Dimir Tempo deck that is now the de facto deck. Most versions are running main deck Baragoyfs, no Nethergoyf. As a result, they're making Kaito a little bit worse. Kaito, for me, the number one draw to play the deck. So I'm basically trying to say people build these decks in different ways. We also see Murktide-less decks playing Feat the Cycle. But yeah, Dimir Tempo, Thoughtseize, Tameo, Bowmasters, Wasteland. That shell is the de facto fair deck of the format. With 4 Thoughtseize and just being a Force of Will deck in general, you're keeping combo relatively in check, and then you're going to be weak to creature decks. So we have a little bit of rock, paper, scissors going on here. Then we have a couple of Izzet versions here, an actual Delver deck and a Izzet deck with Stormchaser's Talent in the place of Delver. I've played both on the channel recently. I really like this Boomerang Basics card in the Stormchaser Talons deck. As long as you're not facing all that much Chalice of the Void, I think this deck is super viable. Or Steel Cutter mainly shines against fair strategies, so it's a way to have a shot against Big Brother Dimir. And with them, most of them cutting Nethergoyf, I like Izzet as a position here when you're trying to beat a bunch of combo decks. Speaking of combo decks, we have the next column here, and now we see zero Omniscience decks. So out of the bannings, that deck was like the number one winner in the minds of many people, myself included. But now we see Sneak Attack instead of Omniscience. And I think a big reason for this is lots of decks found ways to beat Show and Tell the card. So whether that's Pyroblast, whether that's putting something into play like Static Prison, people just found a way to make, Show and Tell into Atraxa or Emrakul very, very beatable. So whether that's Karaka's attack or Talongate's attack or attack with some unblockable creatures or what have you, the Sneak Attack deck is now favored over the Omniscience deck, which is pretty cool to see. JPA is smiling somewhere. I have said on numerous occasions that that deck is basically JPA and nobody else, but look who's laughing now. Sneak Attack very well represented here. Love to see it. The Doomsday decks here, I believe, are mostly from the work of Eureka. Eureka has put a ton of work into Doomsday, is always doing God's work, and a lot of people trust him with their lunch money and their deck choice for important tournaments. Doomsday is still this deck that you can never really rule out. Good thing is, generic cards are good against Doomsday. Removal spells, counter spells, discard spells, stuff like that. So this deck will never dominate Legacy, but it's certainly viable and will keep putting up finishes. Besiege Storm we already discussed, and then I believe this is just another version of Saga Storm. Still working on what to represent these with. The point is, We're trying to kill the opponent on turn 2, sometimes backed up by Discard Spell, sometimes backed up by Veil. What I really like about this is if Dimir Tempo is the de facto deck, then all of a sudden playing main deck Veil of Summer looks really nice against, you know, Oops, Dimir Tempo, bunch of Force of Will decks, and even the energy decks will run Thoughtseize and Cabal Therapy. So seemingly well-positioned Storm deck putting up finishes here, Dark Ritualing out Tendrils of Agony in 2026. You do love to see it. Up next are the creature column, and I have to dodge a sneeze here first. Let's see if I can do it. I did not dodge it. I did not dodge it, but I'm back here. So creature column is huge. We have Cradle Control. But when that deck is winning challenges, then, you know, people will pick it up. So it's now... Oh, that's brutal. Sorry for that, guys. It's now a deck you can expect to face, and not just a random cute deck. It is also kind of cute, so why not both? You now need spot removal, you now need sweepers in order to compete against this column. Especially true with the energy deck, so we see an even mix between Cradle Control and energy strategies. These decks will grind you out if you're a fair deck, and if they build their sideboard correctly, they can address the unfair side of the format, and then all of a sudden, we have creature-based decks that can take down tournaments, which is pretty darn awesome to see, I must say. Then we have even an even number of other vials represented here. One of them was a blue-white version, so closer to the old-school Esper Vial decks, and then 3 Death and Taxes decks. Death and Taxes, a deck that is also trying to succumb, make the opponent succumb, rather, to their, you know, iron grip of inevitability, granting out people Yorion ETB effects, overwhelming card advantage and board advantage, and then taking it from there. Death and Taxes is certainly slower than some of these other decks, but it has a more dominating late game. A couple of affinity decks made it different versions of this deck, but the gist of it is you're using Pinnacle Emissary and Kappa Cannoneer to make huge board states. So in a way, you can say this deck reminds you of what Cradle Control can do sometimes and what Energy can do sometimes. Of course, you have a little bit more variance, a little bit better nut draws, for sure worse, you know, standard draws are worse, bottom of the barrel, but you're a Force of Will deck, so there's that to it. Affinity, currently my favorite deck of Legacy. Next up here, we have the Ancient Tomb column. Eldrazi is still putting up reasonable numbers. I think the Eldrazi numbers are down to a point where I even started cutting my, let's say, Engineered Explosives out of my sideboard or my Abrade out of my sideboard. I'm generally not that worried about Chalice of the Void for the time being, but again, that can change, and I look like a fool, and I need to get back to the drawing board. But for now, Eldrazi is just a very, very solid aggro deck that keeps putting up results. So that is for sure the main Ancient Tomb Stompy deck to worry about. A sweet copy of White-Red Initiative saw the light of day. There's even a Red Initiative creature I've never seen before in the list, which is kind of cool. I believe the list is now up to 10 Initiative creatures, where previously it was 8, but makes a lot of sense. Your best starts are, you know, Spirit Guide out, an Initiative creature, preferably through a cavern, and spiral the game from there. Then we have a single copy of Mono Red Prison. Mono Red Prison, a deck that hasn't seen a lot of play. It's between 0 and 1 copies when I'm doing these videos, and this time it was 1 copy, 1 sub 8. People, you know, still love that deck. I think in general, people are starting to build their mana bases better. You have a lot of like solid 2-color decks instead of like 3 or 4-color decks in the metagame, and that's generally not what this deck wants to see. Chalice of the Void does look quite solid, but then again, you're on the draw against some creature draw, and Chalice is not really going to do it for you. So yeah, very, very polarized play draw deck, and that's generally not the best strategy for winning a tournament. Last column here is going to be the control column. This is a sweet Grixis control deck. People love to play those. Couple of versions of Up the Beanstalk. We already talked about the Jeskai deck and the Lands deck. So worth noting from this pile, there's no blue-white decks, as in, you know, the Failure Stoneforge kind. That deck was trending a lot after Eternal Weekend Asia, but didn't really cement itself, I guess. Of course, could be back. It just plays a lot of solid cards. So I guess this is kind of a blue-white deck, but I'm mainly talking about like creature-centric versions, etc. Also, no Jeskai Wizards, one of my favorite decks. I think that deck is super viable, but again, takes a lot of resources to play. There's a lot of control decks competing with it when it comes to the players who are actually likely to pick it up. So yeah, maybe that deck will be back. In general, a lot more, let's say, hard trends here for us to digest, and that brings me to my next topic. I have decided to branch into the YouTube membership area, and I will be offering gameplay videos ahead of time for members. I will also be doing a member exclusive Metagame Monday After Dark, where I'll be focusing on what changes to make to your decks in the coming week based on these trends. And that's going to be live the moment you watch this video. So if that's anything for you, go for the $5 YouTube Baron membership, and you will have access to that stuff. Of course, if you just prefer to watch the free content, not a problem at all. I will happily keep doing these every Monday and keep you guys up to date with Legacy. But I think that's going to do it for this episode. I was super excited to see some actual hard trends, a little bit of rock, paper, scissors emerging with some solid role players and plenty of room to attack the metagame. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be focusing on. I wish you guys a pleasant week, and I hope to see you back soon on the channel for more Legacy action, gameplay, all of that stuff. Thanks so much for watching.